TV7 Israel News is made possible thanks to your generous donations. Shalom, good evening. This is TV7 Israel News broadcast to you from Jerusalem. Israel ramps up pressure on the Islamist Hamas terror group as it instructs the IDF to prepare for any development. The Iranian-proxy Ansar-Allah threatens Israel with an ultimatum over the Gaza Strip. U.S. President Donald Trump warns Iran that it must choose between diplomacy and war. Israel continues to ramp up pressure on the Islamist Hamas terror organization, while the latter obstinately persists in rejecting an American outline that aims to secure the release of all hostages in two separate segments. U.S. envoy for hostages Adam Buehler, in a media blitz to Israeli news outlets last night, voiced his optimistic assessment that it would take several weeks until all hostages are released. Moreover, in response to frustrations in Jerusalem over Buehler's direct communications with the Islamist Hamas, the American envoy insisted that his actions were coordinated with Israel, even though maybe there were some that said they weren't. Moreover, Buehler stressed that his job isn't to move Israel aside, underscoring that Israel is a major ally of the United States. President Trump's envoy for hostages went on to reveal that Hamas had proposed a ceasefire that would last between 5 and 10 years, in which Hamas would lay down its arms and would not initiate any military action and would not take part in any political activity. Meanwhile, U.S. Special Envoy for the Middle East Steve Witkoff, during a press availability next to the White House over the weekend, pushed back at criticism over Adam Buehler's decision to talk with Hamas directly.
I have not met with Hamas, but my understanding is that any discussions with Hamas have been recent. Not 3 weeks has been reported, but a couple of days, and that's well within the ambit of the special envoy. In fact, that's his job.
Witkoff went on to stress that the Trump administration is not naive vis-à-vis the Islamist Hamas, while stressing further that President Donald Trump was explicitly clear about the looming deadline for Hamas to release all hostages.
We feel that Hamas has not been forthright with us, and it's time for them to be forthright with us. And Eden Alexander would be a very important show. And so we'll see how they're going to react. The president has issued a statement about what's acceptable to him and what's not. And hopefully we'll see some good conduct next week, and I'll be able to go in there and have discussions.
It is important to know that Steve Witkoff is scheduled to arrive in Doha tomorrow, while an Israeli delegation under senior ISA official M has arrived in the Qatari capital today. In tandem, Israel is ratcheting up pressure on the Islamist Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Energy Minister Eli Cohen, who is a member of Jerusalem's security cabinet, signed an order yesterday to stop the flow of electricity to the Gaza Strip immediately. Moreover, while negotiations in Doha are intensifying, IDF Chief of General Staff Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir visited troops in the Gaza Strip and instructed them to be ready for any development.
Always be ready, always be alert, always be suspicious, always train. If you look back, you'll see the houses of Sderot. You are protecting the civilian residents of Sderot. You are our stop line. In this sense, you have great responsibility. I trust you. I'm sure you will perform your service in the best possible way. You have excellent commanders, we have excellent soldiers, and we will know how to accomplish all our missions in the best way possible.
Amid Israel's proactive efforts to ratchet up pressure on the Islamist Hamas in the Gaza Strip, the Iranian-proxy Ansar-Allah, which is dominated by the Houthi tribe in Yemen, has set an ultimatum for Israel, threatening to resume its belligerence against freedom of navigation in the strategic Strait of Bab el-Mandeb and adjacent waterways.
We declare to the whole world that we will give a 4-day ultimatum this ultimatum period for the mediators in their efforts. If the Israeli enemy continues after the 4 days to prevent the entry of aid into the Gaza Strip, and continues the complete closure of the crossings and the prevention of the entry of food and medicine into the Gaza Strip, then we will return to resuming our naval operations against the Israeli enemy. Our speech is very clear, and we confront the siege with the siege. And we cannot stand by and watch the aggressive approach of the Israeli enemy in starving the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip.
It is important to know that Abdel Malik al-Houthi made these remarks on Friday, with the ultimatum expiring tomorrow. And while no immediate response was made vis-à-vis the Houthi threat, U.S. Central Command is continuously conducting reconnaissance flights in the vicinity of Yemen. In tandem, the U.S. State Department announced that it fulfilled one of President Trump's first promises upon taking office, namely the designation of Ansar-Allah, commonly referred to as the Houthis, as a foreign terrorist organization. In its statement, the State Department highlighted that since 2023, the Houthis have launched hundreds of attacks against commercial vessels in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, as well as U.S. service members defending freedom of navigation and our regional partners. Most recently, the Houthis spared Chinese-flagged ships while targeting American and allied vessels. Separately, the U.S. State Department also stressed that the United States will not tolerate any country engaging with terrorist organizations like the Houthis in the name of practicing legitimate international business. Meanwhile, tensions are on the rise between the United States and the Islamic Republic of Iran, amid growing alarm over the Ayatollah regime's defiant escalation, in which it rapidly expands its nuclear program to levels which the International Atomic Energy Agency pointed out has rendered Iran, quote, the only non-nuclear weapon state to produce such nuclear material. U.S. President Donald Trump noted that Iran has merely two choices, and neither of them include emerging with nuclear weapon capabilities.
We're down to the final moments. We're at final moments. Can't let them have a nuclear weapon. I think that I would have had a deal within 1 month after the rigged election of 2020. They were all set to make a deal. Very, very soon. You'll be talking about that pretty soon, I guess. And hopefully we can have a peace deal. You know, I'm not speaking out of strength or weakness. I'm just saying I'd rather see a peace deal than the other. But the other will solve the problem.
Meanwhile, the Islamic Republic Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, in an address to the senior leadership of his regime in Tehran, expressed his defiance vis-à-vis U.S. efforts to bring Iran to the negotiating table.
Some bullying governments insist on negotiation, but their negotiation is not aimed at resolving issues, it's for domination. Their approach is, let's negotiate so that we can impose whatever we want on the other side sitting across the table. If they accept, great. If they don't, we will stir up a fuss, saying they distanced themselves from the negotiation table and walked away from the talks.
Ayatollah Khamenei went on to stress that the United States is also seeking to negotiate about Iran's global belligerence to include its terror proxies, which the Islamic Republic Supreme Leader underscored is a non-starter from his perspective.
3 European countries also issued a statement declaring that Iran has not fulfilled its nuclear commitments under the JCPOA. But if someone were to ask one of them, have you fulfilled your own commitments under the JCPOA, and you say Iran has not honored its obligations under the JCPOA, fine. But have you fulfilled yours? You did not adhere to them from the very first day. Then, when the U.S. withdrew, you promised to compensate for it in some way, but you went back on your promise.
Well, the Ayatollah regime's supreme leader continued by lashing out at Europe for not standing by Iran's side. President Masoud Pezeshkian, who is deceptively promoted as a moderate, reinforced the guiding principles of Ayatollah Khamenei, pledging to never back down, irrespective of any threats.
No matter what threats they make, the issue is that we should not back down.
Meanwhile, TV7 has been informed that the Trump administration will not use Russia as a broker in talks with Iran. However, when asked whether Russia sought to convince Iran on engaging in talks with the United States, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov stressed that the Islamic Republic is a sovereign country that makes its own foreign policy decisions.
Iran is a sovereign country, and it independently formulates its position on major foreign policy issues. It is clear that very tense contacts are ahead.
Thank you for watching TV7 Israel News. It is important to highlight that TV7 Israel is a non-profit ministry with all of our productions exclusively reliant on the generosity of our viewers. Therefore, if you're blessed by the content of our programs, I would like to encourage you to support TV7 Israel with a donation. You can do so via our website at www.tv7israelnews.com. Separately, I'd like to also ask you, as ever, pray for the peace of Jerusalem and salvation of Israel. I'm Jonathan Hassan, wishing you a Shavua Mevorach, and God willing, we will see you during our next update. Until then, Shalom from Jerusalem.